This is the Seven Figure Standard Podcast, hosted by Arash Vasugi and Mikey Stiller, with mindset and strategies to help you break through and create personal freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Seven Figure Standard Podcast. I'm Mikey Stiller, joined by my co-host, Arash Vasugi, and we're so happy to be back with you for another episode. If you tuned in last week, I mentioned that we were going to talk about one specific subject this week, and that is your future self. And if you're a longtime listener, you have heard of Arash talk about or reference your future self several times. And so today we're going to go deeper on that concept so you really understand it, because it is so incredibly powerful. All right, Arash, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mikey. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited about today's topic. I'm sure you are too, because you talk about it all the time, reference it all the time. So it must be something people need to know about.
You know, I've done a lot of deep dives for many years now into the study of neuroplasticity. And the funny thing is, James introduced this 130 years ago. I was telling our clients, if you just go online and just type in William James top quotes, you'll get so much gold out of it. And, you know, I remember years ago, I was sitting down, and when everything changed the game, we've done a lot about questions. We don't really need to do that here, but I started asking myself questions. That's how I developed the Power of Five. You know, well, really what I was doing is I tapped in to another load of information that I downloaded, which really was your future self, your goal. That's really making commitments, not from who you are or who you've been, but who you want to be. And the future self really changes the game. Or, you know, if you don't want to, well, I do want you to go there. I want every decision to come from your future self. Like, what would you experience in your future? See, what happens for most people is they're coming from their present results all the time. Like I always say, like, you'll listen to this podcast and you'll be super motivated. Literally 30 minutes later, you go back to your default self. And that's either your past or present self. When you come from your future self, you change the game, because we've got to understand everything we're doing today, just for today, is building our future life. So if I keep making the same decisions I've always made, I'm going to keep creating the same results. Like most people make the same decision. They'll say, I need to sleep on it. Right away, they said, I'm just going to go keep making decisions the way I've always done. That's going to keep getting me what I've always gotten. So your future is what is shaping your present identity. So we got to understand that. And you have to make a commitment. A commitment means what is done. It is already done. So when you start making every decision from your future, it is extremely uncomfortable in the beginning, extremely uncomfortable, because you have so much chaos going on. You're going to start thinking, am I lying to myself? Is this real? And it takes a lot of guts to hold that future self. What if I told you, Mike, that what you're saying yes to right now, your future self would say no to? And what you're saying no to right now, your future self would be saying hell yes. Not just yes. Mm-hmm. Like, your future self is much wiser than you are. Now, the unfortunate thing, most people think who they are today is who they're always going to be. They may get older, but it's always going to be that. That's why they don't dream anymore. You know, I've said it many times, people have trouble with their wants. It's not because they can't achieve something greater. They don't even give themselves a chance to dream, because everything is a default to who they've been. So when you look at standard, for example, what we're saying yes to consistently is our standard. And raising your standard is going to be very difficult to your current programming. It will be hard for you to say no to certain things that you're used to saying yes to. And it takes discipline and deliberate practice to create that new standard. But then you go and understand your standard is always telling you what you're authentically most committed to. Now, you got to hear my word authentically. Not, oh no, my standard is high. Let's observe it. Let's observe how high it is by what you keep saying yes to. Like if you've always said, I'm going to build this business or I'm going to achieve this goal, but then you look at your behaviors and there's no synchronicity in the action steps, then you're not. Nothing will allow you to get more connected to your future self than being neutral. Viktor Frankl has a great quote. He says, between stimulus and response is where freedom lies. But between that is like a second. So we have to train ourselves to come from our future self. Freedom to me is what we're most committed to. Or bondage could be. You could look at it at both ends of the spectrum. When you're all in, you're coming from your future self. And quantum leaps, like we always work with our clients about creating quantum leaps every 90 days. But quantum leaps are connected to your future self. But they require all in. They don't require sometimes in, they require all in. And that's why when we're setting big goals, like we talk about setting these world-class goals. Well, when you're setting them, it takes you to your future self. But here's the beautiful part. Your past self does not start fighting you anymore because it has no idea what you're going after. It cannot relate to it. That's why big goals are so great. What if I said, everybody listening to this podcast, Mike, I want you to think about you.
Mm-hmm.
Every single person has created a 10x improvement or a quantum leap, however you want to frame it in your mind, in the last 24 months. Now, that could be with their health. That could be with their self-talk. That could be with a certain area of their life. It could be a relationship. It could be they quit their job and went after their dream. But too many people are judging themselves just on results, but they're not judging themselves on their emotional state. The emotional state is always the prequel to a quantum leap. And that's what we want to understand. Mm-hmm. Your future self shapes your new identity. So if you are making every decision based on how you've always made it, just know I'm just coming from my past or present self. There's no chance I can create a quantum leap in that state. For me, there's no chance. I mean, I want every decision coming from it. Before we got on this podcast, I was talking to Mikey, and what I told her, I said, are you ready to take the lid off your mind today? That's exactly what I told her. And she goes, what are you thinking of? I said, I'm not thinking of anything in general. I'm just thinking of the intent. See, nothing makes a bigger indentation in your coding on a subconscious level than being hyper-intentional. Hyper-intentional is, this is what I'm doing, even though I don't know what's going to show up. So when we start doing that, all we're doing is going to our future self. Now, I know I'm doing a lot of the talking right now, but what came in my mind, probably about 4 years ago, I studied this book. I studied it very closely. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And I don't think there's a better book on defining a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And she talks about your fixed mindset is your present self. And then she talks about a growth mindset is your future self. And there's nothing more accurate than that. I saved a quote from her that I'll share with you guys. She said, in a growth mindset, challenges are exciting rather than threatening. So rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to reveal my weaknesses, you say, wow, here's a chance to grow. Now think, is that your attitude? You're going to know if you're in a fixed mindset or in a growth mindset.
So would you say every single day there's several different versions or levels of yourself available, and moment by moment through your thoughts and your behaviors, you're choosing which one to step into. So you're either stepping into your most courageous, bold, winning self, or you're being timid, you're being complacent. Would you say that it's moment by moment, or is it this overarching idea that you have to have?
Well, you don't want to be robotic. So what we want to do is get people to transform that their dominant ideas, when I say ideas, your idea of yourself, how you make decisions. Do you take action with swagger? Is coming from your future self. In the beginning, you're going to be more coming from your past and present. So it may be 80% coming from your past and present. But when you take this seriously and really say, I am going to create a relationship with my future self, and I'll show you guys how to do it today. You change the game. But I like catching myself, because when I catch myself, I just transform my identity just with that little catch. I go, oh, that was my past self, or oh, that was my present self. We have to get in control of our mind, and nothing will quiet your mind down. I don't know how many of you have worked with mantras, but use a word. Let's say your word was freedom. So every time your mind is racing, take some deep breaths and just silently, you don't say it out loud, silently just say the word freedom or confidence or power, whatever it is for you. Well, that's how you're going to neutralize yourself right away. And if your intent is every day I'm coming from my future self, every day I'm coming from the goal, because the goal always is going to tell you what is absolutely essential for you to do, you're going to start coming from your future self the more you master quieting your mind. And that's why it's so important. So right now, you may be dominantly, if you're beating yourself up, you may dominantly be coming from your past self. What if I said your past self is one of the best things you could leverage? You see, I look at my past and I focus on using it as an absolute ally for me of what I did well or what I didn't do well, that I don't want to keep the same patterns. So we can make our past self an absolute ally for ourselves. A lot of people are resisting. I don't want to look at the past. So all they do is bury their feelings. Well, they're creating a deeper virus code. I want you to release them and say, listen, whatever I did the best that I could at that time. But I want to use it so I don't keep making the mistakes. An example, I don't want to keep playing small. I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to go show myself, at least I'm going after what I want, and you're going to fail your way forward. So your present self is very dangerous, because your present self, when you're coming from your present self, you're letting the results control you. It's controlling your attitude. It's controlling your identity. It's controlling what you think is possible. Even when you're winning, I don't want you to get too high. I want you to celebrate your wins. But what if I told you it's just as important to celebrate your losses? See, your future self would understand that. Your future self would say, listen, for me to have big wins, I've got to lose too. Because the losing is where you create the greatest growth. That's when you course correct. That's when you go to this other level. That's when you bring out that other self when you're facing adversity. Mm-hmm. Now, most people are losing. They feel like crap. They put themselves down. I can't do this. No, it's not that you can't do it. Maybe you just haven't done enough repetition of deliberate practice. If anybody wants to study deliberate practice, study Andrew Erickson's work. That's where I learned the term deliberate practice. And, I have all these avenues that I've studied. Like my mentor used to always say, I can brag about this information because none of it's mine. None of it's any of ours. Like you're channeling the same information. It's just implementation is the key. And when you're coming from your future self, you want to create a close connection to your future self. And how you do that is you have to start building a relationship. Like any relationship takes attention. It takes energy. So when you're looking at it, Right. Make a commitment that for the next 30 days, you're going to write and script out a letter to your future self. And you script out in the present tense the outcomes you've accomplished, the characteristics you've become. And you write it out. You say, like you were writing any letter. If you were writing a letter to me, you'd write my name down. So you write a letter, you say, future self. I am so happy that I decided to tap into your wisdom. Everything I do, I come from you. And you are giving me more and more information of how I come. Over the last 12 months, I've absolutely transformed my life. I have never been more courageous. I've never had greater amount of guts. And I have eliminated all the things that I needed to quit. So I have achieved X. So you start writing this because every day you write, it deepens your commitment on a subjective level, but it also deepens your connection where your dominant idea after 2 weeks is going to be automatically coming from your future self. But I encourage you, make this a practice and set a timer. Don't do this for hours. Set a timer, 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day, you just put a timer every morning. In your morning routine, you write a letter to your future self. And that's going to change the game.
Arash, you mentioned one way of building the relationship through writing those letters. Do you have conversations with your future self throughout the day as you're making big decisions or holding yourself to certain disciplines?
Yeah, constantly. Like I ask myself this question, what would my future self do here? I remember I was working with a client, they called me. They go, Arash, I really want to come to your event in London. And they lived in the States. And I said, he said, I'm having a hard time. I said, let me ask you something. Would your future self say yes to this? And I said, you've got to be completely neutral when you ask the question. And he said, yes. Well, he was there. And he said it was one of the best things he's ever done for himself. But that's how I do it with myself. Like I'll observe myself at the end of the day and say, were those actions from my present self, my past self, or my future self? But you're going to get in a habit of doing it. Most people, I can tell you where somebody's identity is on how they make their decisions. I need to think about it. I need to always think about it. They're always thinking. They don't trust themselves. So I would say for this person, if that is you, you've got a huge opportunity to build trust. Trust is going to expedite your results. I want you to be able to trust yourself right away. See, we always know the truth because the truth resonates with the essence of who we are. When we say, I need to think about it, what we're saying is, let me procrastinate. I already know what to do, but I'm not trusting myself. So what are we tapping into? Our past self.
All right. So I think I know what you're going to say here, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. A lot of times we hear people negotiate with their future self, right? Or they're saying, well, I know that my future self would do this, but it's more responsible to do this. Or because of X, Y, Z, I can't make the decision from my future self yet. We've heard these questions in all of our elite programs. What do you say to that person?
I think it's bullshit. That's what I think. I think all they're doing is saying, how can I stay in my comfort zone? See, we got to get really honest with ourselves. That's all they're doing. And they've got to get to the truth. I've said it many times. You got to get so explicitly honest with yourself if you want to create a life of freedom. Now, most people are out, and this is probably going to rub people the wrong way. So they're saying they're always saving money, but they're not having experiences. And like, think about somebody, they get to this place where they save money until their 60s, 70s, and they're not even healthy enough to enjoy it. Your future self wants you to enjoy experiences. I'm not telling you to be reckless at all, but I'm saying, like, let me ask you this. What experiences have you had over the last 90 days? Like, have you had kick-ass experience? That's called life. Our life is meant to be enjoyed, but our future self is going to allow you to enjoy it. Let's say somebody wants to take a vacation that's going to cost $50,000. Okay. Well, how you would plan it is months before you'd say, I'm going to have this paid so I could take the type of vacation I want. And then you come from your future self. Most people are trying to say, I want more, I want this, and they're never going to get it. Like I had a client message me over the weekend and he said, does your Quantum Leap coaching program work? I said, of course it works. Go look. I said, go look at the testimonials, but it's only going to work if you do the work. Everybody, that person is so coming from their past self. The past self, all you have to do is look at even the type of questions you ask. And you're going to know if you're tapped into your future or your past or your present. So we've got to start thinking without effort. But when we think without effort, we're neutral and we're coming from our future self. Your future self is so much more aware than you are, so much more, has so much more grit than you do. It has so many easier ways to get to the end result. Your future self focus on the important few, not the trivial many. Your past and present self focus, I'm going to do more, I'm going to do more. And this is where you've got to say less is more. And you've got to commit. We've talked about leverage before. You've got to commit to spend the majority of your day in your top 20% of activities that are creating 80% of your results. Well, guess what? If all you did was come from your future self, you wouldn't do a lot of the things you're doing. Now, we could even go further with this. Are you busy or are you productive? Most people are busy being busy. So we've got to turn it into productivity. That's where the game changes, and that's where you're going to transform yourself. But you have to have a goal that's worthy of you. There's no reason to go to your future self if you have a 1x goal. There's no reason.
That's true. Yeah. Arash, I think I'm assuming that the assignment or the exercise today is going to be writing that letter to your future self for several days in a row, but is that it? And is there any more detail you want to give us?
Well, it's not just that it. That is very essential to do.
Yeah.
Because you're going to start every day having deeper and deeper connection with your future self. And you're going to know what your future self would do. And then you're going to be at one moment, you're going to be in a moment where you normally say yes, you're going to hold firm, you're going to be strong as shit, and you're going to say no. And you're going to start owning yourself. You're going to start owning you, owning your power. That's where you've got to understand, if we're not coming from our future self, we're not coming from a purpose. And we have to surrender to our purpose. Like Viktor Frankl, I've been quoting him recently, but he said, without purpose, life has no meaning. And you've got to understand and write all the ways that you're different from your future self than you are your present self. And here's the thing, I could go look at everybody and I could say, are you the same person you were a year ago? That's how you're going to know you've already unconsciously been tapping into your future self. What I want you to do is tap into it the majority of your day. Mm-hmm. Tap into it when you have adversity. You're going to get deeper and deeper awareness. That's how you're going to start living successfully.
And just real quick, I meant, is that it? And then is this the assignment? Not is that it is like, oh, that's all. This is something that Arash and I are actually doing right now. Arash, you want to talk about, this is not something that you just kind of made up. This is a practice that we're committed to and that you follow pretty.
Yeah, I follow this religiously.
Yeah.
I asked Mikey to do it with me. Mm-hmm. I said, I'd like you to do it with me. And she said, I'll do it with you. And what happens is when we do this writing, you deepen your commitment deeper and deeper within yourself. But what happens is you're going to automatically let go of the 80% that doesn't serve you. I told you in our last podcast, the best in the world are great at quitting. Quit your past self, quit your present self, and every decision comes from your future self. Every discipline comes from your future self. When you're about to negotiate with yourself, you say, no, my future self would not negotiate. You honor your commitments because that's your standard. Every standard comes from your future self. So now you're not going to have a flimsy commitment. And then you think, feel, and act all day long from your future self. You're going to stand taller. You're going to start having a lot more confidence and swagger. And every attitude comes from your future self. What used to bother you, you're going to be like, nope, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let it go. I was working with somebody a few weeks ago, and they said, usually I'll let it go after a few days. I said, why don't we let it go right now? And this gentleman says, what do you mean? I said, we can let it go right now. Why don't we let it go right now? He goes, well, how do you do that? You just make a decision. I'm not going to let it bother me. I said, why are you waiting 72 hours to let something go? Do you know how much toxicity you are holding inside of you by holding on to that feeling? See, we got to become absolutely excellent at letting things go. What else do we have to be excellent at? The type of commitments we honor, the type of actions we take. I challenge everybody to think bigger. If I said right now, are you thinking big enough? What would you say? I say this to myself all the time. What would you say right now, Mike?
You can always think bigger.
Always. But how you think bigger is with a deep, powerful intention, and then you will become hyper-intentional. I promise you, your future self is hyper-intentional. We have to be a legend in our own mind before we're going to see it in our life.
You just asked a good question. I think to think bigger, you have to be willing to push yourself. And if you're not going to push yourself, or you're not able to push yourself, you need someone else who's going to be able to push you, either a mentor or an accountability partner. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, you want to have proximity with people who are big thinkers, people that will really stretch you, people that will call you out on your BS. No, you're playing too small, and you don't take it personal. Your future self doesn't take anything personal. Like if I told you one rule to live by is don't take anything personal. And that's going to free you up emotionally. When you're freed up emotionally, guess what? You open the space for a bigger and bigger idea. When you come from your future self, you're opening the space to go to the unknown where freedom is created. So we have to think in a certain way if we're going to experience it. And that's where it is so powerful. And how you can even fuse deeper is when you do your mental rehearsal, come from your future self, what you're experiencing. I always tell people, like they say, okay, Arash, I want a lot of money. Okay, let's say, and I'll say, well, what have you been visualizing? They say money. I say, I don't want you to visualize money. I want you to visualize what you're doing with the money, what your confidence is. That's most impactful. See, we don't want money. We want what the money's going to do. It's going to give us freedom of choice. So you see yourself free in all your choices. You see yourself having these amazing experiences. That's how you're going to connect to your future self in your visualization. But that's how you're going to bring the goal achievement process in your mental rehearsal. It's such a expedited rate. But don't look at a thing. A thing is not what's motivating you. It's what you're doing and what you're experiencing is what I want you to see in your mind.
Arash, this has been such a good and powerful episode. I'm so glad we got into this. And I hope that you listen to it not just once, but several times, because this concept, whenever understood and applied, it will speed up your results like nothing else. So Arash, thank you for that. Thank you for the exercise. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and a review. Share this with your friends and family so we can reach more people with the 7-Figure Standard podcast. And we'll see you next week with another episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Figure Standard. We hope you found the insights and strategies helpful on your journey to success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform to help us reach more people like you. To learn more about Arash and Mikey and how Voss Coach & Co. can help you achieve your goals and reach new levels of success, visit vosscoachandco.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 7-Figure Standard.